Herzlich willkommen, bienvenue, naumai, hairimai, welcome, welcome, welcome. Can I invite you just to turn to the person next to you and say welcome in any language you like? Thank you, thank you. I love the way that when you invite people to do that, there's instant laughter, because you're all back in a place where you're thinking of the languages that you have. And I don't know how many languages there are in the room, and I don't know how we might count that, but I hazard a guess that it's an awful lot more than there are people in the room. An awful lot more. So my name's Alison Phipps. I'm a fellow of the Royal Society of Edinburgh, and it is my absolute delight to welcome you here on a wet night in Edinburgh, a Saturday night. This is clearly the place to be, to listen to three young, and I'm making that distinction relatively, experts in their field who are going to share with you some of the cutting edge thinking that they have been doing about languages as a way of celebrating today, which is International Mother Language Day, as designated as an international day of observance by the United Nations. You will see that we have BSL interpretation, which we're absolutely delighted about. Can I ask you all to just give them a round of applause before they start? And we're really grateful because one of them has stepped in at the very last minute. So thank you so much for doing that, both of you. And when we come to questions, speak slowly to give people time to process and interpret, if you will. And they have promised me they will ask for repetition if that is needed. It's my job to do the official part of any welcome to any event in any university-style setting anywhere in Scotland, which is to tell you as soon as you arrive how to get out. So you'll see the fire exits. We are not expecting an alarm, but the fire exits at the back and to the side, the green and white signs with somebody looking like they're running, and an arrow. Do also follow instructions from RSE staff, Royal Society of Edinburgh staff, who will be on hand. And they can give a wave from the back of the room. There's Talia at the back. Talia, would you like to stand up? I wonder, Talia, before we clap her, wait, just hold your clapping, because I'm going to make her do something. Could you just say hello in a language that's important to you? Did you all get that? Just say it once more. Difta. Can you all say it? Difta. Again. Difta. A bit louder. Difta. Okay, you didn't know you were all going to speak Cornish today, did you? Thank you, Talia. And now you can give her a round of applause for all the organising. We've already, you can probably tell because we're quite happy, had an amazing afternoon. And I know some of you in the audience were there, but the Friends of Scottish Settlers have been sharing languages that they are at home in Scotland and teaching those to us in taster sessions. So today I learned that walwal is the Somali for stress. Isn't that a great word? Don't you just feel walwal when you think of stress? I have also got round my neck, this is not Paddington Bear, but this is that way up. I'm just looking at Nadine. That is my name in Bengali. And today, being International Mother Language Day and a day of observance, is a day when we remember that International Mother Language Day is more than just an observance. It's also a call to action. established by the United Nations, it honours the sacrifices of Bangladeshi students in 1952 who lost their lives advocating for the recognition of Bengali as an official language. The language martyrs, as they are known in Bangladesh. And their legacy reminds us of the power of language in shaping identity, education, social inclusion, and all of the violent ways in which the diversity of languages might be excluded or prevented. And I know many of you in the room will have lived with heritages where people were told to stop speaking their mother language. Some of you, maybe with Gaelic, have that ancestry, but there are many others who've had those experiences. And today is a day when we remember that, and we remember the words of Abdul Latif, who said, they want to snatch our mother language. But also remember that the work we do in honouring that is a way of doing the restorative work for that. Some of the restorative work we've been doing, I've been learning from Nadine today, and I learnt this amazing phrase in Bengali. She's going to laugh a lot when I say it, but here we go. Ai Kali, Royal Mile Jabi, which means, rickshaw, can I go to the Royal Mile? So apparently we do have a rickshaw, so if one turns up, you'll know it's worked. It's also a day when we're celebrating the launch of a report commissioned by Scottish Government, looking at languages other than English. We talk about ESOL, English for speakers of other languages, and they commissioned a report for us to think about speakers of languages other than English, that other than English part, and what that means. And a group of experts, some of them new Scots themselves, all with an academic background, came together in a two-day summit to share their recommendations and findings and synthesize a picture of what good practice is in Scotland at the moment. And so that report was launched today. Whoops, it's a little bit slow. There we go. Let me just go back. Here we are. Yeah, so that report was launched today. And we wanted to look in particular at some of the really effective practices for supporting multilingualism. We wanted to look at trauma-informed practices that link in with the New Scots Refugee Integration Strategy, which I have the privilege of chairing for the 32 local authorities in Scotland, for the Scottish Government, and for the NGOs working with New Scots, particularly the Scottish Refugee Council. We wanted to look at whole school approaches to multilingualism, where they're working and where maybe there is room for improvement, what language leadership looks like in teaching and community engagement with schools to foster linguistic inclusion and raise student attainment. We know that if students walk into a classroom where they don't understand what's happening, then their attainment will be really hindered. And that's been an important finding from much of the work that's gone on with UNESCO, as well as other experts who I know are in the room, not looking at anyone in particular, Professor Antonella Sorace of Bilingualism Matters. We also wanted to look at a really quite new innovation over the last 20 years as Scotland's languages have diversified. In the Scottish census, we discovered that about 190 languages are at home in some way or other in Scotland. That's a lot. They may not all be audible or visible, and certainly not in our dominant curricula for languages, but they are there in our communities, making their homes amongst us, often in drafty church halls and community centres on a shoestring budget with packets of biscuits or homemade cakes, and people generously volunteering to teach their language, but also possibly in a bit of a language exchange with people like my mum, who teaches a bit of English. And we've seen some amazing things happening, including research that Hiab was involved with up on Stornoway, where Syrians were learning Gaelic and the local shopkeeper was learning Arabic from the Syrians. So some really lovely, very local things we're seeing that we think could be made much more of from this richness we have. And we wanted to look at asset-based strategies. So much of the time we talk about the language barrier. They're bad English. Anyone ever heard that? And we can flip that and talk about language plenty and the language generosity that we have and those practices of listening. So that's a big part of the synthesizing work in the report, alongside what the experts have been looking at. Our top priorities in the report to Scottish Government, and we are hopeful that they will take these on after the Holyrood elections, but that they expand the infrastructure for ESOL. It's really important. People can speak about what concerns them or what they need and have agency and autonomy to do that themselves, and that we have a good national infrastructure for that. But also that's complemented with good multilingual pedagogies, like the fun we were having earlier today. That we look at community-led funding for the initiatives that currently are on a shoestring. That we look at good interpreting and translation services, because it can be a matter of life and death. If a judge doesn't understand in an asylum determination what a language is or where it's from or what it means, or if there is misunderstanding in the prescription of medicines, then 8 might be understood as 1 or 1 as 8, and that might lead to health risks. Or even, as I learned today, the time of day might be misinterpreted. And finally, we had a recommendation of advancing cultural humility. Rather than stressing the dominance of English above and all else, just maybe a little step back, a bit of listening, a bit of realizing we can never speak all languages in the world, and maybe other languages have a different way, possibly a better way, a more economical way, certainly a more fun way of expressing an idea or a concept that we need right now. So those are some of the priorities in our report. This is the list of experts. Some of them are in the room whose work is highlighted in the report and who are co-authors with me in the report. New Scots themselves, many of them established academics, and some academics who are starting out bringing cutting-edge research. And you can download this off our website at the University of Glasgow with the UNESCO chair. And in order, rather than spending a lot of time on the report, which you can learn for yourselves, in order to really celebrate its contents, then we want to let some of the new Scots and expert Scots actually talk about the work and the research that they have been doing. I'm going to introduce each of them in turn, and I'm going to begin with Dr. Teresa Garrido Tamayo. Teresa is a visiting researcher in speech and language sciences at Newcastle University. She's originally from Spain, and she's completed her PhD at Newcastle University. Her doctoral project took a practical approach to tackling the complexities of identifying developmental language disorder in children who are learning English in addition to languages spoken at home and in their communities across the UK. She's committed to bridging research with educational and clinical practice to improve how multilingual children's communication needs are recognised and supported, including those from migrant and refugee families, in ways that value and nurture their home languages. And alongside her research, everybody does more than just a job these days. Teresa currently works in early years and community settings and serves as a trustee with Friends of Scottish Settlers, who have partnered with the RSE for this event today. Teresa, over to you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me today. It's a real pleasure and a real honor for me to be part of this conversation for International Mother Language Day. My name is Teresa, and I am a visiting researcher in speech and language sciences at Newcastle University, as Alison said, and where I recently completed my PhD. I specialize in recognizing and supporting the communication and language needs of multilingual children here in the UK, many of whom come from immigrant or refugee backgrounds. And I am especially passionate about supporting children and young people from these backgrounds in ways that care for and celebrate all of their languages. This is a commitment that I have reinforced through both my personal and professional experiences over the past few years. And in line with this, I recently became a trustee with Friends of Scottish Settlers, as Alison said, and this is a wonderful charity dedicated to supporting newcomers in the Falkirk area, which also, of course, involves supporting and appreciating their languages. The work that the team do is incredibly inspiring for me, and I'm here today in large part because of them, so thank you so much. I am originally from southern Spain, and I have lived in the UK for about a decade now, both in central Scotland and the northeast of England. So I am familiar not just professionally, but on a personal level with what it's like to live your life across languages and how our mother languages, in my case Spanish, hold a special place in who we are, our sense of belonging, and how we experience and navigate the world. And this is the same for children, of course. So, as I said, the population I focus on is multilingual children, specifically children in the UK who are learning English alongside the languages that are spoken at home and in their communities. So, we often call these languages home languages, and they include children's mother languages, of course. So, in our increasingly connected world, with over 7,000 languages spoken worldwide, and more than half the global population estimated to use 2 or more languages in everyday life, multilingualism and linguistic diversity are not unusual at all. Quite the opposite. They are common features of childhood in many countries, including the UK, of course. And this is especially noticeable in Scotland, where, as today's activities reflect, many languages live side by side. The path to multilingualism for children learning English alongside these languages is highly diverse. Some children are exposed to all their languages, including English, from birth or shortly after. These are, for example, children from long-established immigrant families who use both English and other languages in their home environments and their communities as part of their everyday life and cultural heritage. Others acquire English later in life, later in childhood, once they have already established a foundation in their first language, in their home language. These may be children who have recently arrived in the UK, including refugee and asylum-seeking children, or children born here to parents who arrived recently and are first exposed to English as a new language when they start school. So these are just some examples, of course. So when I reflected on the theme of this panel, I realized that my most useful perspective would be through discussing what children's mother or home languages hold for them. Because regardless of how children may come to be multilingual, one thing is very clear. The languages they use at home are not secondary or inferior to English. They are actually essential and deeply tied to the children's well-being, their sense of who they are and where they belong, and their relationships with their family and community. And as children and their families set down roots in this country, the use of these languages can shift, can soften, even fade across generations. So I want to take this opportunity to raise awareness of their importance. I would like to advocate for their value so they are kept alive and not overlooked or even discouraged in favor of English. Some families are told directly or indirectly to switch to English at home, often because of the mistaken belief that hearing more than one language will confuse children. It won't. Research consistently shows that multilingualism does not cause language confusion or disorder, just as with monolingual children who speak only English. some multilingual children do have what we call developmental language disorder, but this is not because they are multilingual. It's simply because a developmental language disorder can affect any child, regardless of whether they're growing up with one or more languages. The difficulty here is with learning language itself, is not with learning several languages. So when that happens, speech and language therapists, working alongside families and other professionals and educators, need to consider and assess and support all of a child's languages, not just English, because this disorder will show up and affect all of them. Other times we find that home languages are treated as if they have no place in learning or as if they should stay outside the classroom, with priority given to developing proficiency only in English and children learning this language at the cost of their other languages, their home languages. This can prevent children from reaching their full communicative potential. Indeed, a key finding from the research is that children thrive best when they develop skills in all their languages, not just English or whichever majority language is spoken in their country. Imagine being expected to go through your day using only part of your linguistic toolkit. How exhausting and frustrating will that be? It will severely limit how you express your thoughts, your emotions, your needs, even your sense of humor. It will stop you from being and showing your full self. It doesn't seem surprising then that supporting children's home languages alongside their English is associated with higher levels of well-being, indicating that children need their full linguistic repertoire to fully participate in life at home and in society. This sense of well-being is shaped by factors such as how happy and secure these children feel in their daily life and whether they experience any mental health struggles, all of which are essential to their quality of life and broader development, including learning and educational growth. So helping children develop their skills in their home or mother languages has been observed to bring them joy, build their confidence and self-esteem, and improve their life satisfaction, that is, their overall happiness and contentment with life. So one of the clearest ways that children's home language proficiency is linked to well-being is through relationships, and especially within families. Unsurprisingly, research shows that compared to children who speak only English, children's knowledge of the home language is associated with higher family cohesion and higher quality communication with parents. This is particularly evident when parents are not fluent in English, as communicating in their shared language allows for smoother, richer, and more meaningful interactions. This helps make the parent-child bond stronger and in turn supports children's mental health. However, the home language matters even when parents speak English fluently. We still observe a positive link between children's home language knowledge and the relationship between parents and children, even when the parents have high levels of proficiency in English. And one reason is that many parents naturally prefer to use the language they feel most confident in and have the strongest emotional ties to when speaking with their children, both for expressing their feelings and for communicating more generally in day-to-day conversation. This suggests that the home language is not only a backup option when English is difficult. It matters beyond purely practical necessity, carrying strong identity-related and emotional significance. And this isn't only relevant to the children's relationship with their parents. Home languages also support communication and bonds with siblings, grandparents, and extended family members. So a shared language makes everyday interactions possible, rich, and meaningful. And it can serve as a vessel for passing on stories, wisdom, values, traditions, beliefs, and emotional support across generations. For these children, just like for many of us, being able to connect with and learn from their families, and I'm especially thinking of grandparents and older relatives here, is one of the most grounding, formative, and inspiring parts of life. Home languages don't only serve as a means of fostering closeness within families, they also play a crucial role in helping children stay connected to their cultural heritage and community while remaining part of mainstream society. This is really beneficial for children in making sense of who they are and their family history, and in feeling connected to their roots, all of which are essential for developing a sense of identity and belonging, and for their happiness and self-esteem. Alongside well-being, identity, belonging, and relationships, there are also broader developmental reasons to value this multilingualism. Growing up with 2 or more languages has been associated with a range of linguistic, social, and cognitive benefits. For example, research shows that multilingual children can be especially good at adjusting how they communicate depending on whom they're talking to and the social context, that is, adapting to the needs of different listeners. Speaking multiple languages has also been linked to benefits in key areas such as attention, memory, problem solving, creativity. It can also help to slow down brain aging and may delay the onset of dementia symptoms later in life. And of course, it can open up opportunities for education and employment in adulthood too. So importantly, nurturing children's skills in their home languages also supports the development of additional languages, including English. And this is because children can transfer some of the skills learned in these languages to help them develop stronger language and literacy abilities in English. So maintaining and developing a strong foundation in the children's home language not only does not hold back English, it actually helps children acquire English more effectively. So overall, a child's home language is part of what makes them whole and holds their world together. When English is prioritized in ways that push these languages to the margins, children risk losing the words that are inherent to their sense of self and that allow them to communicate and relate to their loved ones. Words that are vital to their happiness and well-being and to their learning and educational progress, as well as their social and cognitive development. So our goal, therefore, should never be English instead of the home language, but English alongside it. What does all of this mean in practical terms? How can we as the public, as families, practitioners, and educators support and value children's mother or home languages? Well, I would say first, keep using your mother languages with your children and keep encouraging others to use theirs. In everyday life, use the language you can connect with and express yourself in most naturally and at ease. This will not harm children's English development. As I mentioned earlier, it will actually support them. Second, celebrate and normalize your and others' mother languages and make them welcome, visible, and accessible. Just like the brilliant activities that have taken place here today to celebrate the wide diversity of Scotland's languages, this is especially relevant for schools, libraries, and other learning environments where children's multilingualism can be given a real place. It can be as simple as having books in the children's home languages, using multilingual signs and displays, and incorporating those languages into everyday routines, as well as planned learning activities. This helps multilingual children make the most of their full language repertoire and see their languages as strengths. And it benefits these children's monolingual peers too, providing them with opportunities to build language skills and awareness, as well as curiosity, openness, and respect for other languages and cultures. And third, I would say support the development of these home languages in a positive, enjoyable way that makes it easier for children to engage with them and appreciate them. Learning languages, just like learning anything really, truly blossoms when we find joy and enjoyment in the process. To finish with, I would like to highlight that the linguistic diversity and multilingualism of Scotland and across the wider UK are wonderful, and they truly enrich our children's lives and our society as a whole. So let's celebrate children's mother languages as the precious gifts that they are. Let's cherish and promote their use at home, in schools and beyond, fostering environments where children feel able to and proud to develop and use their full linguistic repertoire. Thank you so much.
The event follows the format of a question. If we lose our languages, will we lose ourselves? Teresa, I think you've just shown us what else could be lost. The well-being, the joy, the relationships with grandparents. That particularly touched me. And looking at the audience that I can see in the room, hello everyone online as well, then I know that may well have resonated with quite the majority of us who I have a feeling could be grandparents. So thank you so much for the work that you're doing and for that encouragement that you're giving us, building on the clinical and cognitive science that you've been doing with children and seeing what that does for children's well-being, for family well-being, therefore for societal well-being as well. All of you do bear in mind there will be a bit of time for Q&A at the end, so you might just be beginning to formulate some questions as well, and similarly those of you who are online with us. So Teresa, thank you so much. Our next speaker, also a wonderful trustee in her spare time from the Friends of Scottish Settlers, is Dr. Nadine Purna. Nadine is lecturer and researcher at Oxford Brookes University. She completed her master's from Glasgow Caledonian University in social business and her PhD from Abertay University in social innovation. Her interests lie in exploring how rather small third sector organisations build and mobilise social relationships with people from marginalised or disadvantaged backgrounds, and how to better integrate these processes. And that work took her, as all good researchers should, back into the community to work with and apply her work with Friends of Scottish Settlers. But Nadine, and this is very special and precious today, is from Bangladesh and speaks Bangla as her native language. Thank you.
Sorry, I have to close this down. I need this. Right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Nadine Purna. As Alison was saying, I'm originally from Bangladesh, but I have been in Scotland now, or the UK, for about 10 years now. It's an absolute pleasure and honor to be here at the Royal Society of Edinburgh today, celebrating the diversity of languages, the International Mother Language Day, and of course, celebrating Scotland's languages. So together, of course, we'll try to reflect on the theme of today. If we lose our language, do we lose our identity? It's a deep existential question. But I'll try to make sense of it from my own personal and professional experiences, see if I can. When I first read the question, my instinctive response was a yes. And part of that is perhaps because of how deeply entrenched language is to us as a Bangladeshi or as a Bengali. As Alison was saying, the history of it goes back to 1952, the Bangla language movement. There are many languages in the world, but to my knowledge, Bangla is perhaps the only one which was the right to speak was earned through blood, through sacrifice. To tell you a little bit about the Bangla language movement in 1952, it took root in what is now Bangladesh, a country, it's small, a tiny country in the Indian subcontinent. After the partition of the British Raj India, what is now Bangladesh was actually part of Pakistan. And even though the language spoken there was Bangla, our culture was very different to where power resided in the Western Pakistan. When the Western Pakistan administration tried to impose Urdu, a foreign language to us, as the only state language across all of Pakistan, the young students and people of Bangladesh broke out in protest. They took to the streets to demand the right to speak our language, to speak our mother tongue Bangla in our official spaces, in our educational spaces, because we took it as a threat to our autonomy, to our dignity, to our identity. They carried placards saying, "We want Bangla as a state language." They want to snatch away our right to speak our mother tongue. Unfortunately, they were met with open fire from the police. And what happened was that a lot of young people, especially students from University of Dhaka, lost their lives. We know the names of some of them, Salam, Barkot, Rafiq Jabbar, but many were there who lost their lives and we don't know the names. Yet their lives, their sacrifice, of course, remain entrenched in our collective memory. That movement, the language movement, also became the foundational step towards the birth of Bangladesh as a liberated country, as a sovereign, resulting in the headlines later, the bloody birth of Bangladesh in 1971. One of the most powerful cultural expressions of that moment of the language movement is a song written by Abdul Ghaffar Chaudhry. It goes something like this, Amar bhaiyer rokte rangano 21 February, which roughly translates to the 25th of February is colored with the blood of my brethren. How can I forget it? It is sung every year by millions of Bangladeshi as we go to the Shahid Minar, the monument that commemorates the martyrs, and we place our flowers, our respect over there. 21 February, or 21st February, as we call the day, is, of course, now recognized by UNESCO as the International Mother Language Day. For us Bangalis or Bangladeshis, it's far more intimate because to us it shows that language is both resistance and rebellion. A bit from personal experience, as a daughter of a freedom fighter in the liberation movement, the day, as well as the language, I think, its significance was felt particularly strongly or deeply in my household. We marked the day, the 21st of February, glued to the television to see our father go to Shahid Minar and listen to the song that I was just telling you about and pay their respect to the martyrs. But my own journey with language was slightly complex. I grew up in Bangladesh, speaking Bangla at my home, but I studied in an English medium school under the British curriculum. So my identity sort of pulled in two different directions. So on one side was the familiar warmth of my mother tongue, but on the other side was this supposedly the more modern, global, and aspirations carried by the English language. At times I felt I did not fit in either spaces, whereas at times I felt like I could easily kind of flow into both. I'm still negotiating, I think, about that. Yet the language and the capacity to be multilingual provided me with mobility and, by extension, privilege. It allowed me to cross borders academically and professionally, and ultimately brought me to the UK. Well, that was until I had a humbling experience because I moved to Glasgow. My first interaction in Glasgow with this person from the student dorms where I could not understand a word, and I kept saying sorry, and apologizing profusely, but the person was so kind to repeat themselves and speak slowly, and in the end was like, "You're all right, hen." Excuse my Scottish twang. But then I knew I'm in a place where, at its heart, it's about being welcoming and it's about being inclusive. And that language transcends word, and it is about connection and relationships. This awareness is what I've found echoing in my professional research work as well. My research, as Alison was saying earlier, is with rather grassroots social sector organization. So I'm interested in how small charities, small and local social enterprises, how it is that they support people who are experiencing disadvantage or marginalization. How do they innovate what we call socially? And this means that it's not about, innovation is not about technology or coming up with new products or services. Rather, it is about forming new social relationships. And even though language is not my area of research, inquiry, or expertise, I did find that language is instrumental in building and sustaining those relationships. A core finding from my doctoral research was that the words we use, the way we speak and how we speak, and sometimes even what we don't speak, can shape the formation of these strong social connections that I was talking about, between the service organizations, the staff and volunteers who really form the heart of these charities and social enterprises, and the people who are seeking support. At the first instance, though, I was met with this comment that, and realization that even the words that we use in research, they're not neutral, that they carry an ethical weight. Someone pointed out, why do you call it social need and not social rights? Which did make me think. Again, I don't really have the answer to it, but it's definitely something to think about. I found that language can build bridges and also create distance. I'll share some examples from my experience through my interviews and field visits with these community organizations. One community worker, for example, told me that when they are talking or engaging with the service users, they avoid sounding too middle class, they said. Instead, they focus on using everyday familiar language. They called it normal chit-chat in order to build what they call friendships with the people that they're trying to support. Another mental health charity worker talked about using black or dark humor in their conversations with supporting people who comes from a particular profession where they're quite hardwired to really not open up about something so intimate and vulnerable as their state of mental health. But what they said is that as they connected through the use of black humor, they saw some of these sort of guards or sort of coming down, the sort of trust being built, and that's the way they could engage the people and build the relationships with them. Another organization supporting women battling with cancer or those recovering from it spoke about an additional challenge that they faced when it came to connecting with people, especially from ethnic minority backgrounds. That is where they again had to sort of resort to their lived experience. They talked about, having someone from the community speak to the people from those ethnic minority backgrounds, again, in a manner that was familiar, in a manner that would not reinforce stigma or use words that would have any sort of negative connotation to further create distance, in order to build those sort of strong, sustainable connections. Again, so this told us that even these sort of subtle changes in practices can be quite transformative, and that language can shape who feels welcome. I personally did not just learn the Scottish word blether. I'm told that this means this sort of casual, fun conversation, but I experienced it firsthand in one of the field visits I had in a community cafe in this corner of Dundee. So a lot of times in our research in the space of third sector studies or social innovation, where we are trying to increase talk about how we can get more funders or resource providers support these organizations, they would dismiss this small organization as something mundane. But as I was sat there in that community cafe, it had people aged from 4 to 8-year-olds. There were people who were single parents, those struggling with poverty, recovering from substance dependency, people experiencing social isolation. But within the room were also lots of support organizations, so charities that provide, let's say, financial advice, mental health support. There were like 20 of those organizations there. But they all sort of came together and erupted in this conversation and laughter where there was no way of telling who is who. Everyone was there with this similar purpose of building those strong connections and relationships. And the objective was that it is through those social connections, people get or gain more confidence, people gain a purpose, and are able to live a dignified life with agency. Language, as I was saying, can be a barrier and also an enabler in forming those meaningful connections. Another experience from my current ongoing research with refugee assisting social enterprises in the UK is where I, again, experienced the role of language in shaping the work of the support services. Recently, I visited this farm just outside London, which is run by refugees and for refugees and asylum-seeking migrants. I joined this candle-making workshop, and I was told that the purpose of this workshop is, again, to help people feel welcome in the local community and as a way to build social connection and integration. In the room in that workshop, of course, we had people who were refugees from different, who experienced forced displacement coming from different parts of the world. We also had volunteers from the local community. We had the staff from the local welcoming organization, the charity. And we had some people from the refugee background who did not really speak English and were initially apprehensive, were kind of staying out of the conversation. But what I saw was quite interesting is that the children who are there, because they were going to school here in the UK, they started acting as the bridge, as the translator between the facilitator and the people, the parents over there. So even initially some people were apprehensive, eventually what I saw was a connection that was through words, through broken sentences, through hand gestures. So people did eventually connect. They were talking about, someone was picking apple from the farm and talking about how it tastes similar to the apples they tasted in their home country in Iran. So in those moments, they were not refugees or locals or insiders or outsiders. They were just folks, sharing stories of kindness and shared experiences. And that taught me, like, when words fail, empathy speaks. So to return to our question, if we lose our language, do we lose our identity? I do believe, of course, think that there is immense beauty and richness in all the languages that is evoked through words, poetry, and stories, and our everyday conversations. But I still have to ask, are we really losing our language? Or is it just that our experience of it is evolving and expanding? Identities evolve. Identities are plural. I may speak in Bangla and English, but I situate my identity in the values of compassion and justice and dignity, which I believe are universal. With time, I found myself yearning to reconnect with Bangla, my mother tongue, more deeply. I've started reading poems that I never had growing up, discovering words that feel like lost relatives. So language, I realized, it's not static. It grows as we grow, and it can be reclaimed and learned at any age. The spirit of the 21st of February, which we also refer to as Amor Ekushe, meaning the eternal 21st, it teaches, I believe teaches us something timeless. We say in Bangla that Ekushe mane matha noto na kora, translating to the 21st means to not bow down to injustice or oppression. To stamp the movement that happened in 1952, while it was about the right to speak, but it was also about the right to be. Bangla may have been the impetus, but it was about any and every mother tongue. Today, as I work with people and organizations supporting people from disadvantaged backgrounds, migrants, refugees, people experiencing forced displacements, I see language acting as a living bridge. I can see the role that these grassroots organizations, people from the local community with their voluntary support, contribute to in bringing people together. But when they engage with these services or organizations, the way they narrate the stories, they're not talking about that, we are providing some kind of prescriptive top-down solution to help people integrate. Rather, we all enrich each other's lives. Yet, we are also in a situation where we find these organizations, these small local charities, quite cash-strapped, where funders quite still do not understand the language that they speak. And that, as a researcher, part of my research is also to sort of break that barrier and see if we can make that mindset shift in the resource providers or not. To sort of sum it up and end, languages fade when we stop speaking to each other and we let divide and distrust take root. We can find richness in the diversity of words, literature, and culture, and also unity in the shared language of respect, kindness, and inclusion. It doesn't matter whether we speak Bangla, Gaelic, Arabic, or English. I think we all share the same sentiment that we all belong here. With that, I will end my talk. But I want to thank profusely, of course, to the RSE side of Edinburgh, to Alison and Talia for putting together this wonderful initiative, to Sarah and Dora from Foss, who does wonderful, absolutely incredible work to welcome new Scots in Falkirk and support them with settling and integration. And of course, I also want to thank our BSL interpreters and all of you today for joining. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Nadine, and it is just so special to have somebody with such a rich understanding and background from Bangladesh, explain to us what many of us may not have understood about the cost and the price that was paid for language. And when we think about that question, if we lose our languages, will we lose ourselves? I think you've shown us that if we lose our languages, we may lose our freedom. We may lose what sustains relationships, intimate relationships. We may lose our agency, possibly our intimacy. We may be forced to bow down. And that today, particularly, we remember those who refused to bow down but paid an enormous price. So thank you so much, Nadine, for that, but also for all those inspiring examples. Can I just ask you to put your hands up if you have anything at all to do with a small, cash-strapped, local, volunteer organisation sustaining relationships? Just put your hands up, because I can see Antonella, put your hand up. You see, there you all are. There you all are. Thank you. It's a bit of a theme coming through in the research at the moment, and it's good for us to see that. So our last speaker on the panel before we move into Q&A is Dr. Hiab Johannes, who is a lecturer in forced migration and decolonial education with the UNESCO chair at the University of Glasgow. Hiab conducts research and syntheses to address theoretical, methodological, and policy-related questions. Recently, Hiab co-edited a special issue on intercultural knowledge production for the journal Language and Intercultural Communication, and a book titled Cultures of Sustainable Peace for Multilingual Matters, which you can download for free. It's open access. His book, The Refugee Abyss, was published by Routledge in August 2025 to critical acclaim. And I do think it is one of the most extraordinary books written since Hannah Arendt and Agamben were writing their theoretical work on refugees. His research interests include poetics, decoloniality, political theories across physical, and at this point, our BSL interpreters are going to be a little frustrated with me. Ontoepistemic, spatio-temporal, and juridico-political dimensions. Hiab, thank you so much.
Thank you for bearing with these words. And good evening, everyone. And Difda, salam. Hello. Can I use this one? I think I have PowerPoint, but it has a password.
Yeah, we may need Rab to just run down. This is the language of technology speaking. It looks like there's a password to put in. Somebody should have told my 18-year-old self just how many passwords I was going to need in my life and how many I was going to forget. We're coming. I can see a slide with languages on it. Great.
Thank you. So as the other speakers have said, I tried to grapple with that question as well. But in more theoretical works, and forgive me if I am too much theoretical, and I need translation to translate them, I will try to do my best. And to begin with, before even I go to this theoretical thing, it's not showing up here again, I don't know why. Perfect. So I want to start with how we introduce ourselves in my language group in Eritrea. I came from a very minor language group called Bilin, and there are around 60,000, 70,000 people who speak that language. And in total, the Bilin population is around 120,000. And the language is gradually disappearing, particularly in diaspora, because we're speaking the most dominant languages as part of our day-to-day language, and we're not maintaining, we're not keeping that heritage anymore. And it's staying in Eritrea in some parts of the country, but it's still dominated by other languages, and it's gradually disappearing. And this has become a risk in the last 10, 20 years because of the younger population leaving the country. So I want to begin by teaching you how to introduce yourself in Bilin. And salam, in my language, in Arabic, and many other languages, in Amharic, in Tigrinya, and a lot of other languages means peace. And salam is how you introduce yourself, stage of salam. Greeting is always with peace. With the word peace always acts as a way of greeting. And how you say salam is the first thing, and then an, like the name An. An, I want you to repeat it. An, Yusum, then your name, Hiyab, Yistakun. So An, Yusum, Hiyab, Yistakun. So that is a full sentence, which means my name is Hiyab. And you can see how difficult it is to translate for the translators, how if I literally work out how they're organized. Look at the sentence there. It starts with I, and then my name, and then Hiyab, and then called. Imagine how difficult it is to translate a language that is very different from English into English, or English into that language. It's really, really hard. And this, I always admire translators and interpreters when they try to translate and interpret these languages, because they're very, very difficult. So now, before you even look at this, as Alison said, this is the book that Alison mentioned, The Refugee Abyss. And I want to say a few words about what does refugee abyss mean. And it comes from a Martinican philosopher and poet called Edward Gleason, who writes a book called A Poetics of Relation. And he uses the term abyss there. And by that, he means three things. The first thing is the loss of home. Forced displacement, particularly during slavery, colonization, and even now, forced migration, creates a loss of home. And not just the loss of home, but the inability, and in some contexts, the impossibility of making home elsewhere. So that is the first dimension of what he meant by abyss. And then the second dimension is what he refers to as natal alienation. And he gave us an example of people in the Caribbean, in America, who have lost their ancestral ties after slavery. The descendants of the slaves do not even have the names of their ancestors. Their last names are the last names of their masters. And this is why we see in America, for example, during the civil kind of revolt is when people like Malcolm X use X as a placeholder name for their last names, because they have lost any connection, any ties with their ancestral languages, but also with their ancestors themselves. And that creates an abyss that separates them in the same way the Atlantic Ocean separates them from the continent where they were kidnapped and taken to the Caribbean and other places. And the third dimension of that term, abyss, is what Fanon calls the amputation of being, which basically means the separation of the body from the human and the murder of the human in the first place. If you murder the human, what remains is the body, the physical, corporeal body, the flesh and bone. And that can be exploited, that can be put to whatever use the master or the oppressor wants it to be used, because you're not seen as a human in that point. You're just a body. So the word abyss in that refugee abyss carries all these three dimensions. So in the refugee abyss, language is often among the first casualties. Displacement strips refugees of their mother languages, followed by the slow violence of forced assimilation, often disguised as integration. The displaced are denied the right to speak, to name, to remember, or to write the language that once carried their existence, their heritage. We witness the disappearance of our languages, the erosion of our cultures before our eyes, and the severing of our generational ties. Our languages, cultures, histories, and places of origin become the unknown, the unknowable, an imagined realm of trauma and deprivation. We represent the border, the limit, the last to tell our story, speak our language, savor our culture and food, and uphold our community's guiding wisdoms. And these are from the book. As a former refugee and parent myself, I dwell at this border between carrying my ancestral language forward and witnessing its slow death. Each lost word marks the gradual extinction of a world. This is not merely the fading of the grammar or the vocabulary, but a form of linguicide that erodes our capacity to name and renew our rituals. With the loss of language, we are exposed to what I have referred to earlier, natal alienation, stripped of our ancestral ties and denied a recognized past or future. Fanon reminds us that to speak is to exist absolutely for the other. But in what language do we affirm this existence where no language remains? What language do we invoke to reach the other, whose precarious being demands our speech and whose gaze unsettles our own? How do we speak to the other whose otherness we have marked and distanced, whose humanity we have torn apart in silence? Or have we become so fluent in silence, so rehearsed in denial, that we no longer remember how to exist for the other? And what becomes of multilingual education, this broken promise, when it no longer speaks in a language that restores the ethical, the political, and the existential? Exactly. So when you receive that coffee, you respond by saying, "Ikanyele," which basically means nice coffee, thank you. Tu'um is another word which means nice coffee as well in Tigrinya. You can use these words. And yet, we are holding on still. Holding on not as resistance to change, but as an existential insistence that what has been carried in breath and bone cannot be fully erased. To hold on to our language is to dwell in the paradox of suspension between loss and renewal, between silence and speech, refusing the totalizing threat of linguistic erasure. We cradle fragments of sounds, gestures, and memories and offer them to our children and to one another as poetic defiance against linguicide. In this holding on, we reckon with what the world has become. We participate in the ethical, poetic labor of sustaining our heritage. We create spaces for listening, of unsilencing, of becoming with one another, of being in the communion with other languages. In this persistence lies the slow and stubborn work of remaining human in the world that otherwise would unmake us. In this labor of holding on, the coffee ceremony gathers us into what Gleason terms as the open circle, where the known and the unknown meet without any expectation of reduction of one into the other. Around the slow roasting of coffee beans and the rising steam of the jabana, the pot, we enact our language as relation. In the wafting of aroma, in the passing of the finjal, the small cup, in the rounds of serving and sharing, our language is mothered as living praxis. In this radical openness and nonviolence, the coffee ceremony restores speech as hospitality, as sanctuary, as communion. Our language is reborn in the open circle and passed on as breath between us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hiab, for that philosophical, poetic, and also really practical example of languages, and for teaching us some words in Bilen so that we can be part of holding it for a little longer, holding on to it for a little longer, as well as in Tigrinya. And I was thinking about the question we have before us: if we lose our languages, do we lose ourselves? And how you have shown us that if we lose our languages, for the people that you represent, we enter the abyss. We lose home. We lose the possibility of making home. Our being is amputated. We lose our humanity. We witness the extinction of a world. We forget how to exist for the other. And yet, holding on still. And you also invoked that example of the naming of enslaved peoples. And I know, and some of you will probably have seen the monument to the children who were killed in Jamaica. And you will have seen that nearly all of the names that those children bore were names that originated in Scotland. The Mackenzies and the Kennedys and the MacDonalds and the Fergusons are all the names given to children who are descendants of enslaved people who've lost that connection to their own ancestral lands. So this is a big question. It's a deep question. It's a hard question. It's a moral question. It's a political question. It's a practical question. It's a question around coffee drinking and clinical care, around how to honour people, how to sustain in tiny cash-strapped communities. And it's now up to you to see if you have any questions that you would like to ask to our panel of experts here, having heard what they've said. And that also goes for those online. I think, Talia, you've got a couple of microphones, is that right? Two of you have got microphones, thank you. And we can get some questions passed in from those online. I know some who were in the sessions earlier are online, so it's great that you've been able to join us. So do put your hands up, and if you have got a question or a comment that you'd like to raise. Stand over here because I've got the light in. So there's a question in the middle row there, first of all, and then a question over here. I've got a few in my bag, but I may not need them.
So a question for the second speaker. Thank you very much for having drawn the 21st of February to our attention. Just a question of fact. Are there any minority languages within Bangladesh? And if so, has the Bangladesh government been particularly supportive of these minority languages, having learned the lesson of 21st February themselves?
Hello? Oh, that works. Thank you for your question. Yes, so there are, I think, over 40, 50 other minority languages from people who are either called indigenous to the land or tribal communities from hill tracts. There has been ongoing demands about recognizing those languages. Several has been recognized. There has been efforts made to even kind of, retrieve the scriptures that were lost. There has been demands to integrate their languages in the national curriculum. There have been, again, some more, the ones that are spoken by a larger section of community, those have been integrated, like Chakma language or Garo. But of course, there is still a lot of work left to be done. But it is part of the ongoing conversation, and one that, of course, repeatedly comes up around the 21st of February as well. So yeah, thank you for your question.
Thank you. And there was a question over here. Yep.
So the title of the talk, the overall presentation today is, if we lose our languages, do we lose ourselves? And my question is, to what extent does language determine thinking? Recently, there's been, of course, the advent of these thinking machines like ChatGPT and large language models, and these appear to be somehow synthesizing thought using statistical laws about the languages that we use. So to what extent do you, as professionals working in this domain, think that language determines the content of our thought? Schopenhauer, the philosopher, comments offhand in his writing that learning ancient Greek, and I think perhaps Latin as well, and so the classical languages, is a really important step in developing the capacity for proper thought. And he's quite adamant about that. So at least he believes that our linguistic capabilities have something to do with our intellectual capabilities. And so would you agree with that? How would you agree if so? And if you disagree, would you comment further, please? Thank you. I really enjoyed the talk today.
There's a whole world inside that question for us to unpack. I can see that Teresa is going to be thinking about that a lot, although I did wonder if we might come to you first, just on that first bit of the question about, whether language determines thought or thought determines language. It's almost a chicken and egg question, isn't it? Yeah, do you want to have a go at just your thoughts on that first?
Yes, of course, language determines thinking and vice versa. And I'm not really sure how to answer this question because it was so good. I'm going to be thinking about it online now. Definitely a lot to reflect on. I do think in terms of, AI more generally, how even though, of course, it is language in a sort of way, but it just is missing that, humanity. And so the artificial side of it is something that obviously is fascinating, but at the same time, I suppose, quite scary. And I'm not sure where I'm going with this. I'm just reflecting on the question, sorry. Don't know if anyone else.
You're looking like you want to come in on this. What do you want to say about?
I
you know,
Try.
AI, large language models, language determining thought, thought determining languages, and Schopenhauer and the classics. I think we had that.
That's right.
To what extent language plays a role in the structure of our thinking?
Yeah.
And I guess it's a bit of a chicken and an egg question. Which is the chicken and which is the egg? Thank you.
Yeah,
The egg becomes the chicken, isn't it? And yeah, I think I'm thinking about Arendt's work on her book, The Life of the Mind, where she tries to answer exactly the question you're raising now. And the structure you're talking about, she divides that structure into 3 dimensions. One of the dimensions is thinking, and then what she calls willing, and then finally judgment. And in the thinking part, thinking is always dimensionless and multilingual. It doesn't require language, specific language to think. It's always thought from within the body. It doesn't require any kind of thinking, and any kind of linguistic intervention and at the stage of thinking. But when you move it to the idea of willing, what are you willing to do with that thought? Then that becomes, then language intervenes in that stage. Lived experience intervenes. And then they inform what she calls the judgment. She doesn't say much about judgment because she died after she's written just 1 page of that part of her book. So that is what she says. In another context, in the context of South African apartheid, Joseph Biko, if you remember, is one of the famous kind of leaders of the anti-apartheid movements, who was tortured to death in 1977 in prison, like Mandela and others were in prison at the same. He was one of the famous figures. And one of the things he said at the time, before his death, during his torture, was one of the most potent weapon that the oppressor has is the mind of the oppressed. These are his words. And by that, what he meant is, the moment you have access to the mind of the oppressed, you turn it into your colony. You can instill any idea, fear, erasure, inferiority, all of these kind of things. And that mind, the colonized mind, as he calls it, or Ngugi, the Kenyan philosopher, calls it, is thinking, is already a thinking that has left the idea of a thinking as a dimensionless space. It's not in the space that the thinking is coming authentically, but the thinking is actually informed and calibrated and animated by external factors. And that at that point, it's not a language determining thinking from my understanding, but actually thinking itself, losing itself in the mind of some people because the thinking is already taken away from them. So I will stop here.
Thank you, Hiyab, and thank you also for just referring to that brilliant book, Decolonizing the Mind by Ngugi wa Thiong'o, which came from his experience in prison. And after he was in prison, he began to do drama work in communities in Kikuyu, and vowed after that he would only write in Kikuyu, and continued to do that, and his work was then translated afterwards. So the way that people have thought and shifted and moved around these questions of where thought needs to be, but also which languages it needs to be in, I think is very important. We haven't really touched on AI, and I can see the panel thinking, I'm not really sure I want to go there. And having been sent on many a workshop at the University of Glasgow to learn how to use Gen AI, I've come to the conclusion that this is nothing to do with artificial intelligence and everything to do with formatting. And that's been really helpful to me, because then I'm not worrying about artificial intelligence or large language models, but I'm actually thinking about what is the formatting that this might help with, as opposed to I'm going to outsource my thinking and my being. That I'm not doing, that's staying with me. But the formatting, there are bits of formatting that it's really helpful to use in a text editor and other places. And obviously there are many other things that can be done at speed, and we're going to learn how to do that socially and find a language for it in time. But I found formatting quite a helpful way of thinking about what we're doing with some of these models. Any other questions? Yep, there's one in the middle row there, please, first, and then one on the end. Just pass the mic down. Thank you, Talia.
Hi there. If you were thinking about purely practical, so if you were thinking about redesigning a town centre, maybe in one of the small communities that we have here in Scotland, and you wanted to get the language element for the new Scots fully integrated, what would be your top tips for somebody who was looking at, say, redesigning a town centre and putting that into the master plan? And I'm particularly thinking about underrepresented communities and children, the rights of the child as well, the United Nations rights of the child. What would be your top tips for somebody who was looking at redesigning a place that would integrate these new Scots into the communities?
What a great question. I'm hoping there's somebody from Scottish Government here with a big pot of money to give to people to do this. But I'm wondering, Nadine, if you want to go first?
So if I've understood your question right, so you're talking about integrating people into the design of the town centre?
Integrating people into their decisions, asking their opinions, integrating their decisions, but also flowing from that, integrating their life into the town centre.
I don't know if that's like the best example, but I think in Dundee they did take some initiative in the multiply deprived region of Lochie, and they did try to talk, initiate a consultation with the local people, but also some of the, as we call them, new Scots, and they did this mural of depicting the stories of the lives of the people who've just come here.
Oh, okay.
And that was a way to also, again, share their stories. People pass by the murals every day, you see what lives are like. But they also involve people into the actual design of some of these community projects as well. So
That's
it's co-produced in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, on one end, you're serving, of course, the goal of helping them integrate, but you also include them, like you said, into the decision-making and design of the project itself.
And also not to integrate them, but also once they're integrated, how to design a town centre that will meet the needs of everybody with all their different backgrounds and languages.
Wow, that's quite a big question.
Sorry.
I'm just wondering, maybe if we come to Teresa, you can think about it a bit. But
Yeah,
the question as well about children, yeah, how would you work with the children of a community so that everyone, whatever background, feels integrated?
I mean, there is enshrined that children will be consulted on these land use planning opportunities, but it's how to integrate children with different backgrounds, because they're obviously a minority, but then they're further minoritized by the fact that they might not speak the language. It's really complicated, something I'm grappling with.
It's another brilliant question, to be honest, and I will give it some thought. But my first thoughts are, of course, consult with the children, make them part of the initiative, obviously with the collaboration of interpreters and the collaboration of their families as well, so the children feel safe to express their views, so get them and their families involved. And I'm just thinking of using, child-friendly methods to get them involved and for them to feel able and feel safe and feel encouraged to share their ideas. I know this is quite general, what I'm saying.
Maybe I can get your email and
yes.
discuss this with you afterwards about the best way to do that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You would make a giant coffee ceremony.
Exactly.
And include the children as part of that, I know.
And we've been doing that at the university with a lot of our colleagues as well.
In Glasgow?
In Glasgow, in Falkirk, in many places, actually, with people sitting in that circle. And I think part of your question is answered in the report that Alison was saying, Alison was telling us in the beginning. Do we actually create the conditions for that to happen?
Well,
What
this is it. This is what land use planning can do. Land use planning can create those conditions, and that's what I'm kind of asking. What would be the best way to create that? If you're designing a new town centre for communities to live and thrive in, they integrate and then they're integrated. And I'm just wondering if you had any ideas about the best way to.
I think it's a question that goes beyond ideas of integration. Okay. You can't bring them and integrate them into that, but open that space for everyone. Yeah. So this is why in the integration terms, I use the term non-exclusion instead of inclusion. Inclusion where you're including bringing people to terms that are already created, the conditions that are already created without their involvement, that may not work for them. But non-exclusion actually radically opens your space as a space for everybody. Okay. And that opening may bring all this variety of different languages and different kind of ways of being an interpretation of what is integration actually into that space. And the openness is what we don't have. And it's mainly to do as well with practical challenges around resources, around lack of training, understanding. There are many, many other things, right? It sounds very easy for me from a position of a UNESCO chair where we work at the University of Glasgow. Oh, we can go with a coffee ceremony or some of the kind of rituals and maybe with a drum and then start bringing people together. But that is not as easy as it is, like it sounds, particularly when you go to communities and because the conditions are not there. How can you go to the streets and make those possible when the streets are already occupied by people who don't want to see you in those places?
I'm beginning to see that maybe language is key in this, and we have to think about the communication in the first instance.
Yeah, and I think as people who are coming here, as a refugee parent myself from a refugee background, I take that responsibility very seriously and try to speak the language to my daughter, to people around me, right? And that sustains the language at home. But we need the conditions to make that possible. At least in the option to, for example, we have French and Spanish and other things in the curriculum, right? When people can just choose them if that's what they want to learn. Can we have Arabic in there, or Amharic, or Tigrinya, or other languages? Do we have the resources to make them possible? And I think the idea of designing itself, some of this language escape any idea of design, because you cannot design around a language that does not have a written script, that does not have a curriculum designed everything. Like if you ask me how would you design your billion language in any curriculum, it's not even it wasn't even a written language a few years ago. How do I even think about this? It's beyond design, about storytelling, and this is why I bring in coffee ceremonies and other stuff that are acting as a holding space for that incompatibility with design and the immeasurability of the quality of life and the existential questions they try to answer with that space.
I think the mural idea is actually really practical, and that's something that could be achieved to make people feel more integrated. I think that's really, that's a great idea. Thank you.
And I'd commend the report to you because there are a range of examples in there. My colleagues, Dr. Lavinia Hirsu and De Brochna Futro, both of whom are working with permaculture design in schools and landscapes to look at land use and multilingual planning with children.
Brilliant.
But I'd also commend the work of Professor Sarah Kinden, who's been doing work in Nainai, in the Lower Hutt and Upper Hutt Valley in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and again has redesigned the whole of the town centre around non-exclusionary practices with all of the different communities. So there's some really good examples of how you first create the possibility and the conditions that can then mean you can ask the question you were asking in the first place.
Thank you.
We've got a question online, I think. Talia, you've got your hand up, and we're coming up to time. I may have time to come to you. Let's see.
So we have a question from online saying, some universities have cut back on language degree studies, for example, single language in depth. Will this diminish relationships from Scotland, or as joint degrees still offered? Is it okay?
Is it okay that some universities have cut some language programs?
Yes, I think so.
Can I ask the panel what they think about that? It can be a short answer. No. Teresa says no, Hiab says no.
I've read overall cuts in social science and arts and humanities, not just languages. So that's something to be quite concerned about. It definitely puts a dent in our capacity for critical thinking. So I'm not sure specifically about the cuts in language studies, but I have seen or learned about a lot of universities making or shrinking their social science and arts and humanities department. And of course, as someone from the social science, it's quite daunting prospect.
I think one of the things is I would bring that question to the grassroots community movements and community centers. And if languages are working really well and being shared and creating the relationships that you were talking about, I wouldn't worry about the universities, that the really bureaucratic and very institutionalized forms of structured forms of learning, which are only accessible to a particular group of people. Do you think like all these displaced people here are going to go to university and learn languages, new languages? How possible is that if we are thinking about practical things, for example? Or can we also imagine bringing all these multiple languages into university curriculums and courses? It's almost impossible, isn't it, practically? So I think language, the place of language is where the mother is, and the mother is the community. The mother of all languages is the community.
Thank you, Hiab. I'm going to stop us there. I know there were other questions, and there'll be a chance to chat to people at the end, but I do want, first of all, to ask you to express your thanks to Teresa, Nadine, and Hiab for this really stimulating and rich set of talks. I'd also like to ask you to thank Camille, Mustafa, Rab, Andy, Leslie, Michelle, Anna, and of course Talia for putting on this event today. Thank you to the RSE. I'd like to thank Friends of Scottish Settlers, particularly Doro and Sarah, for all the work they do and for working in partnership with us to bring this really diverse and unusual event to bear today. Thank you to you. And then incredibly hard-working and with not an easy task, please thank our interpreters, Emmy and Abby. It says here on my notes, Professor Alison Phipps is to advise guests to visit the RSE website for future RSE Investigates events. And the next one will be the history of Scots and English in 10 objects, which I think sounds fascinating, on the 6th of March at the RSE. But I know you've got one coming up just after that in April, Antonella, so plenty in this series around languages. I want to thank all of you online and in the room for coming out on a Saturday night. If we lose our languages, will we lose ourselves? Perhaps an answer is if we speak and listen to your languages, we will find ourselves. Thank you.